Welcome back to the Puppet Master series with Puppet Master 6, otherwise known as Curse of the Puppet Master. And even though this film chronologically takes place after the fifth one, this is arguably one of, if not the most pointless addition to the series, because it not only ignores the previous installments, but everything that happens will be completely ignored by the preceding films as well. It might as well not exist. And in fact, it pretty much doesn't exist, because the plot of Puppet Master 6 is an almost identical copy of the preposterously named film S. No joke, beat for beat, Puppet Master 6 hits all the same notes as S. You just need to change puppets for snakes. It's ridiculous. So, with all that in mind, let's take a look at this fucking masterpiece. We begin quite beautifully at maximum cliché. It was a dark and stormy night. As our main character and new puppet master has locked all the puppets in a cage, he explains to them that what he's done was not his intention and next time will be better. A sentiment which will be all but nonsensical and contradictory at the climax of the film. Well, I say that, but it's really hard to tell what kind of sentiment the film is going for anyway. Oh, also the puppet roster this time is again different to the last film. Torch is gone, never to appear again, Six Shooter is still there, and all the classics are there. Pinhead, Jester, Tunneler, Blade, and now even Leech Woman returns, somehow. Well, considering the director of this film also directed Puppet Master 3, it's possible he was a little annoyed that a puppet he basically used an entire film to give a backstory to was no longer being used. Also, yes, please remember, and then ask how in the hell could this possibly have happened, the director of this non-entity also directed the best Puppet Master film. Our puppet master, named McGrew, takes a mysterious box to the middle of nowhere and then burns it. But he does say sorry to the box for doing that, which continues to scream into the opening credits. Now, granted, they didn't just choose to have white text on a black background for an ungodly amount of time as an opening credit sequence. No, this time the credits consist of puppet footage from all the different movies. Now, granted, only someone who has watched all the previous films would notice this, but I do find it strange how they show the puppets doing wildly different things. Like in one, they might be about to slaughter innocent people, while in another, they're marching together to kill the evil creatures slaughtering innocent people. All it does is make it difficult to understand if the puppets are good or bad, since they act both ways. Also, Torch is shown in the opening credits, despite not appearing at all, because these films are incapable of being consistent. The next day, McGrew and his daughter Jane are talking when the conversation shifts to a former worker named Matt, who McGrew says left to deal with family issues. But McGrew, or George Peck, who's playing him, is so woefully terrible at obfuscation, it's obviously clear he had something to do with the missing worker. Elsewhere, the third and final main character is introduced, a gas station attendant named Tank, who's more interested in carving his little wooden sculptures than serving customers. Those customers are very stereotypical bullies as well. McGrew and Jane soon appear, not to defuse the situation, no, this clearly frail old man is going to escalate things by threatening to fight the bullies. Interesting reaction from McGrew, considering, and this is a mild spoiler here, he will exclusively use the puppets to fight his battles for him for the rest of the film. Kind of inconsistent with the tough guy stance just then. But anyway, to continue with what little plot there is, Jane finds the small wooden sculpture Tank was making and shows her father, who's so impressed by Tank's whittling, McGrew offers him a job then and there. Which of course Tank takes immediately because it's literally too good to be true, considering he's giving him room and board for just wooden carvings. As well as the puppets, McGrew runs what he calls the House of Marvels, which is a random assortment of interesting and not so interesting items, like supposedly the first electric chair, or something Jane describes as...
It's an old gorilla skin stretched over a wood frame.
Marvels might be stretching it a bit, I think. Tank is soon shown the puppets, and it's pretty damn odd that both McGrew and Jane are almost whimsical about each of them.
And that lovely lady is Leech Woman.
Why Leech Woman?
Well, hope that you never find out.
Yeah, she vomits deadly blood-sucking leeches. Isn't it such fun? Also, something else I need to mention about the puppets. Later there's a dinner scene, and despite the puppets supposedly being in attendance, they never actually appear with the actors. For example, Tank will look at, say, Pinhead, and not only will it be a separate scene, but an entire other film. This clip I'm fairly sure is from Puppet Master 1. And unless McGrew lives in a pile of rubble, this scene of Jester is from Puppet Master 3. In some of the most painfully obvious cheapskate editing I've ever seen, and it occurs throughout the film as well. I would say about 70% of the puppet footage is reused stock from other films, which not only shows you how terrible the budget was, but just how little regard they had for this film. But let's be honest, as the series continues, it's less about making anything good and just making a quick buck out of crap and then moving on to the next one. Also, apologies for the sudden lighting change. My light exploded. Anyway, it's time to get to the point of the film, as McGrew has been trying to make his own living puppet, but needs Tank's sculpting skills to make it perfect. There's no mention whatsoever about the super secret life-giving formula for this particular film. It doesn't exist. All that's required is just a really good sculptor, apparently. But hey, I guess it's difficult to add your own lore when you whole cloth rip off a completely different film. The next day, Tank sells tickets to the exhibition to an incredibly staged-looking queue of people. But no matter, the cops soon show up to break up the lack of activity. And they also find McGrew giving a puppet show. But yeah, when you think about it, unless your entertainment is evisceration, the puppets aren't really that great as entertainers. So that would be why Six Shooter is the only puppet who performs any kind of trick, specifically shooting cans. While also miraculously not shooting people who are in the direct line of fire. The whole puppets without strings thing, seemingly not entertaining enough anymore. McGrew talks with the cops, who actually give us the most honest piece of writing ever made for these films.
Well, I guess folks will pay to see just about anything.
Considering this franchise just had its 13th film and continuity reboot, that makes that line not only appropriate but prophetic as well. The cops are incredibly suspicious of McGrew, questioning him about the previous assistant who has seemingly disappeared. Nothing actually happens though, the sheriff just makes it painfully obvious that he suspects McGrew of foul play, and that's it. Moving on to more important things. Who am I kidding? None of this is important. McGrew gives Tank a load of wood to make a brand new puppet out of. He also shows Tank the plans for his new puppet. Please take note that the designs show legs and feet. It'll be stupid later. McGrew also tells Tank the secret to making puppets live.
You put your soul into it.
Yeah, you put your soul into it. No mention of the lightning or the serum made with human brains, and let's not forget Lord Zed over here. But then again, this film is confusing the method for creating living puppets with turning humans into snakes. So naturally there's going to be a few crossed wires. So Tank has now begun carving the new puppet. A whole minute and 10 seconds is spent watching him carve the pieces. It's incredible that a film that's under the 90-minute mark still requires extended padding scenes. You see why I call this a non-entity. It just feels like it's been made to check a box. It's a pretty pathetic display. After working on the new puppet, McGrew is pleased with the progress, and reveals more about why he's doing this. He talks about how Blade is perfect, with more footage from previous films being used. I'll try to summarise what McGrew's theory is here, because, as he says, Blade and the other puppets don't feel tired or hungry, nor pain and fear, and unlike man, they're not at war with themselves, specifically saying things would be better if we were all like him. That's what he's trying to do. Turn people into puppets that can't speak, and like Blade, don't even have hands. So it doesn't seem like much of an improvement to me. But again, going back to the Snake movie, the main goal of the bad guy was to turn people into snakes because they might better survive pollution and ecological disaster. Equally asinine idea, but at least it's an idea. Compared to McGrew's bizarre theory that we'd all be better as puppets because of fuck knows why, it's practically genius. Eventually, Tank gets too tired and goes to bed. He wakes up that night to discover in shock and horror his legs are now wooden pegs. But don't worry, it's just a dream sequence. Hey, maybe this film does have a connection to one of the previous films. The fake-out dream sequences was a staple of the very first Puppet Master. Wow. Remember when this series was about psychics? There's then even more padding of a whole minute of nothing but Tank carving some more wood, before he's surprised by Jane causing him to cut himself. While bandaging him up, they get to know each other and sparks start flying. Not literally, unfortunately, because, as I mentioned, Torch is gone. But they do end up kissing, and it's implied, with her putting her top on, that they had sex. Another time when the series didn't go for pointless sex appeal to get more viewers. Honestly, though, I feel a bit bad. Like, if they had done that, I probably would have understood. The film's like a wounded animal at this point. It's just laying down to die. It's just pathetic. There's nothing you can do except put both barrels between the eyes. But while they talk, Tank feels weird again. And when he looks, he has really bad clockwork in his chest. But you guessed it, it was just another fake-out dream sequence. Hard to say if that means they didn't have sex at all. I don't think so. But when you put plot-significant details in with your dream sequence, it makes things a little hard to follow. The next day, Jane sees Tank working too hard on the puppet and convinces him to take a break, helping her with an errand. They walk through some woods to someplace supposedly super secret, according to Jane, but wouldn't you know it, that's exactly where McGrew burned his mystery box at the start of the film, as they stumble across the ashy remains. Tank also finds a small hand, confirming the box contained a puppet. Jane runs off for some reason, and because absolutely everyone knows this location, she runs into the arsehole guys from the beginning, who immediately give her hassle, and eventually, childish bullying turns into actual harassment and implications of rape. When Tank appears, he rightfully throws the guy on his car and starts choking him. It's kind of weird how the film portrays Tank as the bad guy in that situation. Well, okay, not the bad guy, but definitely just as bad as the guys threatening to rape someone. Which is ridiculous, frankly. But even Tank himself reacts that way, practically vomiting on the road just because he choked a terrible person. But you see, he lost control, gave in to his baser instincts, revealed himself as a cold-blooded killer. That's seriously the line the film is taking on this, without either setting it up beforehand or following through with the idea, which is pretty much this entire film in a nutshell. And yeah, this idea is also what McGrew uses to nonsensically prop up his everyone should be a puppet theory, telling Tank that he really is a killer, so should be free to be that way without being at war with himself over it. And this, for some reason, doesn't raise any massive red flags. Anyway, the dickhead from before is about to move things up from doing potentially implied illegal things to just full-on criminal activity, as he straight up breaks into the house. But miraculously, a puppet actually does something in this film, as Pinhead attacks. He is surprisingly defeated quite quickly and torn to pieces as the guy runs off though. Pinhead is usually the one that gets thrown around the most because he fights with his fists. But this would be the first time he's effectively been killed by someone. He's never been so fragile. But maybe getting thrown down the stairs constantly has taken its toll. This is just something I've noticed about McGrew, but he seems to think he's some kind of evil Clark Kent. Because if you watch, every time the scene requires him to look a bit sinister, he takes his glasses off dramatically. Especially in that last scene, combined with him running off, makes me think he's got a costume with Blade's face as an emblem. Well, not far off actually, as he talks with the puppets dressed in a Blade costume. I guess we know who his favourite is now. McGrew gathers the puppets in a box and drives off, presumably for nefarious business. At that moment, the douchebag is back at his cave ranting to himself about Jane while lifting weights. in a ridiculous display of homoeroticism that makes me think this film is trying to tell us something about this character.
That's right. Do it, bitch. I said, do it.
McGrew lets the puppets, specifically Blade and Tunneler, loose in the house, and although it takes them an agonizingly long time, they eventually kill the guy. And probably the worst death scene of the franchise too. Firstly because it's devoid of creativity, but also because it all pretty much takes place off screen. But we already know how terrible the budget is. This just exacerbates things. Back with Tank, he's not only fixed Pinhead, but he's also brought him back to life. No explanation on how exactly he did that. Oh, and Jane tells Tank that she was angry at him for attacking the home invader. How messed up is that? Well, she does end up having sex with him for real this time, so I guess it's water under the bridge. The film is trying to make Tank out to be this person on the verge of becoming a killer, or someone who just doesn't understand their own strength, like Lenny from Of Mice and Men. But he's not portrayed or even acted like that at all. The character is as boring as they come, with little to make him stand out. So maybe that's why the other parts of this film are so desperately pulling up the slack. After Tank leaves her room, McGrew talks with Jane, surprised to find Pinhead alive, but makes a point of saying that Tank might be gone after he finishes the puppet, and not to get too attached, which is another huge red flag that gets completely ignored. The next day, Tank is back carving his wooden pieces, worrying Jane with how pale and tired he is, so they call the doctor to examine him, and under the guise of picking up a delivery, McGrew gets Jane to leave. We immediately shift to nighttime, for atmosphere, and the douchebag's body has been found by the sheriff, who starts questioning his completely unconcerned friends about his brutal murder, going so far as to arse around with the sheriff for no discernible reason. It's like they're stuck on douchebag mode, even when it makes no sense. So the sheriff rightfully beats his face in to get the information he needs, finding out about the connection to McGrew, heading there immediately. Can I just say that despite this film being incredibly short, this ending really does drag on a lot, so I hope you don't mind if I speed this shit up a bit. So back at the museum, Tank has been strapped to a table, McGrew constantly spouting nonsense about Tank being sick in the soul. At the same time, the cops show up, but it literally doesn't matter, as McGrew gets the puppets to kill the cops. But hey, at least the killing scenes are a bit more interesting, even if they do splice in scenes from other movies in an attempt to spice things up a bit. McGrew continues his ritual, while the puppets from Puppet Master 2 watch on, and back with Jane, she's found no parcel waiting for her, and phoning the sender confirms there never was a delivery in the first place. Also, the person on the other end of the phone seems to be using the worst fake elderly woman voice I've ever heard.
I don't know nothing about no mermaid. I ain't talked to your daddy in around 6 months. I ain't had no mermaid in almost a year.
I've no idea if the person was going for an elderly woman's voice, but that's how I'm going to describe it. Anyway, due to this, Jane decides to go back to the burned box, and this time she finds the puppet that McGrew burnt, but it's still very much alive. And even though one of the reasons McGrew has for turning people into puppets is that they can't speak, this one says Jane's name, confirming to be the previous assistant in puppet form. Did McGrew burn it simply because it was ugly as sin? Because if that's the case, I would understand. What was the point of making that thing? It doesn't look like any of the other puppets, unless you count Frank Sidebottom. But I'm overthinking it, I guess. Also, in the film, the assistant that went missing is found as a lizard man in a freak show, showing that the first experiment didn't work in turning a man into a snake, which makes sense. But here, there's zero reason given why this puppet was a failure. Anyway, we're so close to being done now, I promise. Shall we see the new puppet that Tank has been working on? That's it? Seriously? First of all, it looks like a knockoff Decapitron. But more importantly, it's not made of goddamn wood! What was the point in Tank carving all those pieces? The thing's made of plastic! Also, you remember those feet and legs that he was supposed to carve out as well? I guess that didn't work out because the thing's got tank treads. Also, get it? It's a tank. The fact that that is what this film has been building up to this entire time fills me with such existential ennui that I can't even describe. So anyway, Tank is transferred to the new puppet. It gets his face plastered on the front of it, and then for some bizarre reason, the puppets attack McGrew. No idea why. They just decide to kill him. But who the hell cares anyway? And then Jane shows up to watch Tank shoot her father in the face. Which is the exact same crappy cliffhanger ending that Scott too. I don't think anyone needs to ask why this film was made. It's so blatant, it's so shameless in its ridiculous box checking and just keeping the lights on attitude to the series that is all it is. The series spinning its wheels. Even with the other films, they have something, albeit small something, to keep you interested. This film does not. It's just so non-essential to the series, or even filmmaking as a medium, a carbon copy waste of time. Let's just pretend this film never existed, shall we? So far, I would say this is the lowest the series has ever gone for me. When you can't put any effort into your cheap and nasty straight-to-DVD horror crap, something has gone seriously wrong. Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching, and also a huge thank you to everyone who has chosen to donate to the Patreon so far. Their names are on the screen right now. And if you wish to donate to the Patreon, you'll not only be helping to keep the channel running, but also help toward the goal of reviewing all 3 series of the Hannibal TV show. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please feel free to visit the Patreon page on screen right now, or in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.